Thanks, Benj. Can I just tell you what a delight it is to hold this document in my hand and to do a presentation where I don't have to start by saying, this isn't actually it, but we're getting there. So really exciting to be here with you. I've been looking forward to this opportunity to share with you a little bit about the process, a lot about what the statement says and does, and to hear questions from you as well. You know, if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a moderate-sized metropolitan area to write a position statement. Lots of people are involved. This was an almost 3-year process, which is quite remarkable in and of itself. 6 different presentations at national conferences that were listening sessions where we invited people to come in and talk with us. 2 open comment periods where we posted drafts of the document. And the final document is the 29th draft of the position statement. So a process that's really been iterative, and we've learned a lot and listened a lot along the way, and I think that's important. There's a couple of people who've been involved in the conference this week that I want to just acknowledge quickly. Mike Robb from the Fred Rogers Center, Warren Buckleitner from Children's Technology Review, who had to leave to go to Italy, poor guy. Lisa Guernsey from the Early Education Initiatives, New America Foundation, Fran Simon and Karen Nemeth, who were here, again had to leave as well. All had roles in this process. And while we had lots of open comment periods, we had lots of times when we asked key thinkers to take a look at what we were doing and feedback for us. So I just wanted to acknowledge those folks. I also wanted to acknowledge Lisa's unbelievably well-timed blogs during this process. Some of you may know that this was a rather contentious process. And NAEYC would tell you that that's right. That's why you write position statements, because there's disagreement about something and there's conflict in the field. But oftentimes Lisa's blog would hit just at the right time to kind of calm some of that down and to say things that we as the writing group couldn't really say about where we were headed. So that was great. I also want to mention that we've got a kind of a perfect storm happening here. The statement is now in our hands. I think that's fantastic. We've got new books coming out in the next couple of months from Fran and Karen, from Warren, from a colleague of mine, Brian Perling from Erikson Institute, fantastic teacher of young children using tech in great ways. And Lisa Guernsey's hot off the press, literally still warm in my hands, book on screen time. So this thing's going to really pop. Not that it hasn't been, not that those of us who are interested in technology and young children haven't been thinking about this hard for a long time, but I think the timing is really interesting. There's some new initiatives happening. I put some cards around on the table about something that we're beginning at Erikson, and certainly leadership from NAEYC, from the Fred Rogers Center, and as you heard from Michael Levine yesterday from the Cooney Center and others. I think there's an opportunity to step up and really say, here's where we're headed with all of this. So that's what this is about. Let me tell you a little bit about what we were up to. First, let me just quickly give you some context on Erikson if you don't know us. Our vision is that every adult who works with young children or on their behalf will be knowledgeable, aware, skilled, and alive to the possibilities of each child's life. I like those last words. They're really powerful. Alive to the possibilities of each child's life. And our values are important as well. We're about relationships and relationship-based education, a commitment to social justice, about diversity, about complexity, about having very high standards and a commitment to excellence. All of those things were held up to me as the Director of Distance Learning, first ever Director of Distance Learning at Erikson, as challenges. You must be able to do these things. And the first one on the list, relationships, was what people were most concerned about. How are you going to do that online? So that's another presentation for another time, but I think we've found a way to do that. The 3 words at the bottom are particularly critical at Erikson. It's the answer to almost every question that gets asked at Erikson. Well, it all depends, because child development and human relationships and the ecology of early childhood is so complex. There's no one answer that's going to fit every situation. So we always start with, well, what do we need to know to make the decision? Let me also tell you about kind of how Erikson is fitting into this ecology of technology in young children. Been involved in the position statement. As Ben said, I'm also a senior fellow at the Fred Rogers Center. It was actually that hat I was wearing throughout the position statement process. Fred Rogers Center, Michael talked about yesterday, is developing a framework for quality digital media for young children. Again, a process that's been churning around for a while. Mike Robb is about to launch the ELE, the Early Learning Environment, so talk to him about that. In November, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with an updated policy statement on media use for children younger than 2 years. This was the one moment where we were glad we weren't done writing yet, because this is an important group and they had important things to say, and we still had an opportunity to respond. And you'll hear as we go that I think we're very complimentary, but we didn't take exactly the same approach as the AAP. Common sense media, Michael talked about this yesterday as well. The amount of time young children are spending looking at screens and engaged with media is something we have to pay a lot of attention to. He also talked about their report. If you haven't read this and you're in teacher education or professional development, go to the CUNY website and read Taking a Giant Step, a blueprint for teaching young children in a digital age. This is the blueprint. Where are we going to go? How are we going to prepare teachers? How are we going to prepare practitioners to do this well as things have changed? And I will tell you that as a teacher educator, I'm worried about preparing us. I'm worried about preparing teacher educators who are not tech savvy or digitally literate and may have some real concerns about technology as well. And then lastly, the projects that we're working on at Erikson. I can't do any presentation without evoking Fred Rogers, and I think this is a particularly poignant quote. Fred said, "I went into television because I hated it so, and I thought there was some way of using this fabulous instrument to be of nurture to those who would watch and listen." So if we take Fred's lesson, right, you don't have to love technology, but it's here. He didn't like television. He was very worried about what he was seeing on television. But he figured, well, then we've got to do something about it. And I think the most important lesson from Fred Rogers and from Erikson and from the Rogers Center and from NAEYC is begin with the children. This actually isn't about technology. This is about children and child development. We'll get to the technology conversation, but we don't lead with it. We don't start with that, and I think that's really important. But I think Fred also gives us a challenge here. New screens, new media, new ways of thinking about technology, very different than in his day. Like it or not, we need to figure out ways to use it to help young children. All right, so some of you know I've been tweeting like crazy throughout the conference, but I can't tweet from up here. I suppose I could, but I won't. So I've just given you a little suggested tweet if you're wondering about what you might say. And I'm going to nudge you a few times during the presentation to use that technology. It's been really fun for those of us who've been active tweeters in the last few days to kind of watch what each person was grabbing from different sessions to get a feel for things, but also to extend what's happening here to people who aren't here. And I've been watching my Twitter feeds at the comments that are coming from people who aren't here or who are picking up ideas from what's happening. I think that's very, very powerful. So again, this is what we're here to talk about, the Joint Position Statement on Technology and Interactive Media as Tools in Early Childhood Programs Serving Children from Birth through Age 8. That's a mouthful. If you go to the NAEYC website, you can get a copy of the position statement. You can get a copy of the key messages document that I put on the tables. You can look at a webcast that we did. There's a lot of resources there that are available to you. If you don't remember the whole URL, just go to naeyc.org and look up position statements and you'll find it. So what's in a name? A lot of words in this name. They're very thoughtfully and carefully and intentionally chosen. We're talking about technology and interactive media. So we defined both. And in the position statement, we have a very broad definition of what we say technology is in 2012 and beyond. You might remember that the last time NAEYC wrote a position statement on technology in young children was 1996. So things are a little different than that. You might want to go back to that document, though, and see how solid it was around developmentally appropriate practice. Didn't anticipate all these new technologies and all the kind of challenges that we have today, but it did very solidly put technology in that context. The word interactive is really critical to us. Michael yesterday talked about a nuanced statement. This is one of those nuances. We hope you get it, though, because we're not talking about passive use of technology. We don't have a lot of time for a conversation about passive use of technology, particularly for the youngest children. We're talking about interactive media. But when I say interactive, I'm not just talking about the fact that a child sits at an iPad and something happens as they do something. I'm talking about interactions with other people. I'm talking about children interacting with each other, adults interacting with young children, parents interacting with their children. So we've got this new potential, I think. Perhaps the most important word throughout has been tools, that we're just simply defining technology as tools. And we've got lots of tools in early childhood education. We have lots of tools that we want teachers to be able to make choices about and use appropriately. Again, we're talking about all of early childhood, the early childhood programs and settings. The statement does not directly address parents and young children. That wasn't what we were taking on when we wrote the statement. I think there's lots of good information in here. I think what's more interesting is what's the role of early childhood educators in translating some of this thinking to parents in a way that's relevant to them. So I think some of that falls to you. And then lastly, birth through age 8. This was the most contentious part. There were many folks who believed we should not be talking at all about technology for children under 2. And that if we had to write a position statement, if we really had to do this, we should be talking about three-year-olds and through 8-year-olds. The organization, NAEYC, is about young children in the early childhood years from birth through 8. The thought of writing a position statement that did not encompass all of that and that did not provide guidance for practitioners for all young children seemed to me to be missing the point. And so we've held to that. We probably took the most criticism for that. I'll talk a little bit about where we ended up with on that with the very youngest children. But it is important that you understand that this was a very intentional choice. We believe that the field needed some guidance on that. You've seen Wordles before, and the big Apple Wordle in the middle is from a colleague of mine, Maggie Power. She posted it on her blog the day after the position statement came out, and it is the position statement. She just ran all the words through Wordle. Up in the corner, you see one that I did on the top 30 words in the position statement. If you just look at the top 30 words, the word technology comes screaming out at you, right? If you look at Maggie's, when you put all the words in the mix, it becomes just one of many words, and it becomes one of some really interesting words: technology, children, childhood, media, appropriate, learning, use, families, development. There's lots of words in here, and I think that's a kind of an interesting way to conceptualize it. But then there were some words that I would tell you were the working group's guideposts, the things that we held most dear, and that now we think have become keywords for how you implement the policy. I already talked about tools. Intentionality is critical to me. We need teachers who are intentional. It's not enough to know what you can do with technology or when you might use technology or how you might use it. You need to know why you're using it. And that's a high-order teaching skill and a knowledge base. So you'll hear, as you read through the statement, you're going to see the word intentional a lot. Because we're also drawing from Fred Rogers and this notion of, you do things because you know why you're doing them. Appropriate certainly relates to developmentally appropriate practice, and it's everywhere in the statement. Effective is an interesting one because it raises the issue now about, well, does it work or doesn't it work? Is it okay for kids or is it not okay for kids? We can't leave effectiveness out of the conversation. Certainly we've been talking about effectiveness in lots of sessions here as it relates to outcomes and measuring children's experiences in technology. I think this is also the overarching piece of we shouldn't be using it if it's not effective. If it's not working, why are we doing this with kids? Integrated is an important one because we're talking about integrating technology across the curriculum. No more computer labs for young children. Let's be done with them. No more Chip's 5 minutes a week to hold and use the iPad. No, because the iPad can go wherever Chip goes, including outside. The technology can now be mobile, just like children are mobile. So really thinking hard about integrating across the curriculum, I think, is critical. I also think it's one of these exciting opportunities to really think differently about technology and to get out of that mindset. Balance is, of course, a critical one because, again, one of the concerns that was raised was that, well, you tech-crazy people are just talking about all tech all the time. And we were never talking about all tech all the time. We were always talking about technology as one more thing in the life of a young child in an early childhood program. And so balance is critical. It's not about all technology. It's not about all outdoor play or all creative art either. It's about finding a balance between all of these things. Interactive I mentioned already, not just interactive as in technology and child, but interactive with others. Michael talked about engagement and co-engagement. I just want to tell you that my aha in the 2.5 years, my moment when I knew this was really important, was when CUNY Center started talking about joint media engagement. And I realized that in this device, we have an invitation This device is an invitation. Come and try this with me. Come and do this with me. And so we can talk about the pass-back effect. And I would like to say one thing about the pass-back effect. I have two daughters who are now 25 and 23. I was a parent of very young children trying to drive down the highway, keeping everybody happy. We all had pass-back strategies. All right, so the fact that it's the iPhone now doesn't inherently mean that that's an evil thing. It is an evil thing if what we're saying is just go take care of yourself and I'm not interested in interacting with you. Then we have to think about it differently. But I think we have to be realistic about that as well. But this idea of engaging as in the process is engaging, the experience is engaging, but also co-engaging. The next two are critical to us in the field and bigger than us in the field, access and equity. This is where it could all fall apart, isn't it? Because if we believe as a field that these tools hold great promise and provide new opportunities for learning for young children, but only for some young children, this isn't all right. It's not okay. So when we talk about access, it's about access to the technology, it's about access to broadband connectivity everywhere, for everyone, and it's about equity around opportunity. So making sure that children in programs where there is technology have an equal opportunity to engage with it if they choose, and so we have to pay a lot of attention to that. Select, use, integrate, and evaluate are the words that we have used throughout the statement to describe the teaching process. I select a piece of technology, I try it out, I integrate it across the curriculum, I figure out if it worked or didn't, and what do I do again, and I start all over. So a process, these are action words for teachers. And then the last one, I think for me at least, is maybe the most critical, which is that the position statement raises the bar around what is appropriate and effective practice with technology, and we've got to help practitioners get there. There's a gap between what practitioners know and have experienced and are able to do with technology and what we're defining as the way to use it most appropriately. That falls to us. That's back to we need to train the trainers, and we're the trainers, so we need to train ourselves and get ready, but we need to help teachers as well. I think actually we're going to see a whole lot of action in this area, which is exciting. Okay, again, so just a quick suggested tweet about some of my keywords: attentional, appropriate, integrated, and balanced. Let me just read this to you. When the integration of technology and interactive media in early childhood programs is built upon solid developmental foundations, and early childhood professionals are aware of both the challenges and the opportunities, educators are positioned to improve program quality by intentionally leveraging the potential of technology and media for the benefit of every child. Well, that's a loaded paragraph, isn't it? A lot of those keywords in one place. I think that this, to me, really captures what our philosophy was. When it's intentional, when it's technology and interactive media, when we start with what we know about child development, then we have the possibility. Not a guarantee, we have the opportunity, the possibility that our interactions with technology will be positive. Again, just a nod to Fred, and these words come right out of the statement as we acknowledged kind of the guidance of Fred Rogers over our shoulder. Fred Rogers demonstrated the positive potential of technology and media that are grounded in principles of child development. Fred always said, put the child first, put the children first. If we keep remembering that, we're going to be just fine. We're going to be just fine. We're not going to get out of control here. We're not going to lose track of what's most important in early childhood. So some key messages, and again, these are paraphrasing from the statement. When used intentionally and appropriately, technology and interactive media are effective tools to support learning and development. And so that also implies that when they're not used intentionally and appropriately, so unintentionally and not appropriately, then in fact there can be a negative outcome there. Intentional use requires early childhood teachers and administrators to have information and resources regarding the nature of the tools and implications of their use with children. There's the PD piece. And now we've got administrators in the mix as well. There's going to be a need for technology leadership in this conversation. Who's taking the lead? Who's going to figure out how to do this? Where are our exemplars? What programs are already doing really amazing things with technology that the rest of us could learn from, take a look at? I think that's also part of the culture of this that we need to create. Limitations on the uses of technology and media are important. Michael talked a little bit about that. I'll talk specifically about what the big concerns were. Special considerations given to the use of technology with infants and toddlers. If we're going to talk about children 2 and under, we really need to think hard about that. if we're going to not say no technology, which is what we were asked to say, and which is in many ways the easiest thing to say, then we need to understand what are we actually saying is okay and what are we saying isn't. And so I'll come back to that as well. Attention to digital citizenship and equitable access is essential. Ongoing research and professional development are needed. We have lots of research, 30 years of research around television and its impact on kids. We know a lot about that. Michael showed us some great early days stuff yesterday from Sesame Street. We've studied Sesame Street as much as anything. We know that as we went through the literature, it's interesting that there's not a great transfer of what we learned about television to this new many screens environment. Some of it holds true, but a lot of it we just simply don't know, and I think that's going to be critical. So here are some of the issues that we heard again and again. And as you read this statement, I hope that you see that we put these issues right up front. We're not ignoring them. We're not saying there's no technology is grand, it's all wonderful. We're saying, no, there's some real concerns in the field, and we need to be mindful of them. But we also made the decision that now that we've identified them, we need to get on with making it work appropriately. So that was our position. Technology and interactive media are here to stay. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. This stuff is here. And you know, in my days working in early childhood, I always talked about early childhood practitioners as low-tech, high-touch. They wanted to get together. They wanted to be together. They didn't skeptical about technology. They didn't really, this online learning thing, the project from Florida that I listened to the other day, you know, this is just not natural for us. And we're pretty convinced it's not going to be any good either. And so I think we have to think about that, but it is here. These same teachers have smartphones and iPads and sit in the training, texting and checking message. They're using the most sophisticated tools we've got every day in their lives. The gap, the conversation is not so challenging as it once was. To say, if you use an iPad and have fun doing it for yourself, then thinking about using it with the children in your program is really not such a huge leap anymore. It's actually not so hard to think about. There are concerns about whether young children should have access to technology and screen media in early childhood programs. This we heard a lot. One of the perspectives was children have this at home. They have plenty of technology at home. They need to be playing and doing creative art and being outdoors when they're in early childhood programs. For some children, that may be true, but not for all children. And this is where we got back to access and equity. You know, you're eliminating from the conversation a whole group of children that need the access. And if, in fact, we believe that using these tools and gaining 21st century skills in the early years is important for school success and later success in life, then we can't just have some kids who are already privileged and have access continue to have the most access and other kids have none. That's just simply not okay. All screens are not created equal. So this screen is not the same as this screen, is not the same as this screen, is not the same as that screen if I had an interactive whiteboard. They all have their own affordances, their own opportunities, their own possibilities, their own limitations. Something that we have to be thinking about. But a screen is not a screen. And we heard a lot about screen time related to, you know, any screen is just inherently a bad thing for kids. And I'm not sure I think that's okay. Conflicting evidence about the value of technology to children's development. This is really important. I told you about AAP, right? So the American Academy of Pediatrics, which actually never said no technology for children under 2, even in their previous statement, but was always quoted as saying that. The thing that got thrown at us the most was AAP says no technology. Actually, read the statement. They discourage the use of technology. They want parents to be mindful of that and make choices. But what they say, and I think this is really an important nuance now, what they say is the research is unclear. We don't actually know if this is okay or not okay. And there are studies that tell us both those things, and it's kind of a mystery. Since we don't know, we're going to be very, very conservative and suggest that parents of the youngest children simply not use it. We said, since we don't know, but these tools are everywhere, we have a professional responsibility to figure out what to do with them while the research begins to tell us how to do it even better. And I'll guarantee you, if the research evidence starts to suggest that we're making a really bad decision here by having very young children and technology, then we're going to have to think through that very hard. But that was a slight difference, and I think an important one. The appeal of technology can lead to inappropriate uses in early childhood settings. What do I mean? I mean tech for tech's sake. right? I love my iPad, and I'm going to bring it in and use it with kids, and I found these apps, and it's really fun, and I just want to play with it, but I don't have any real reason. I haven't thought about it. I haven't integrated it. It's not part of the curriculum. There's a risk of the glitz and the excitement of tech to take over and just drive teacher choice. That's not okay. And then again, the issues of access and equity. I'm just going to, I kind of gave you the pieces in the beginning. Let me read the second paragraph. Children's experiences with technology and interactive media are increasingly part of the context of their lives that must be considered as part of the developmentally appropriate framework. Well, that's what I just said, right? Technology's here to stay. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. It's in kids' lives already. It's in their teachers' lives. It's in their parents' lives. It's here. So we can't ignore it. It's not okay to say, well, you know, let's keep it out of this part of their lives. But we have to be sure it's part of our conversations around developmentally appropriate. Let me tick through some of the principles. So the first one should be obvious. Do no harm, right? Any use of technology should not be harmful. I mean, right off the bat, that seems so obvious. Why do you have to say it? It's the very first thing we said. Do no harm. Know what you're doing. Be thoughtful. Be careful. Understand the implications before you do things. Use developmentally appropriate practices as your guidepost for deciding whether and when. Whether? Huh. Did NAEYC and the Rogers Center just tell teachers they could actually choose not to use technology? I think we did. I think we said your professional judgment is required. And in this particular case, or with this particular technology, my professional judgment is this isn't appropriate. So I'm choosing not to use it. Just because it's here doesn't mean we use it. So whether, I think, is again, a nuanced word, but it's important. Professional judgment is required. And now I could get really passionate about this one. Maybe the thing that bothered me the most throughout the process of the position statement was the underlying current, the assumption that actually teachers of young children can't make these choices. We have to make them for them. And what we're going to make for them is no technology. We're just going to make this really easy for you. I don't know. If we don't have faith in the teachers of our young children, we've lost, technology is the least of our worries. We've already lost the game, right? This statement is based exactly on the opposite of that. We have great faith in teachers. We acknowledge that they're going to need some help. We acknowledge that they need some professional development. We acknowledge that we don't have the knowledge base and the experience yet. But we have faith in them to make choices. We're already assuming and hoping they're making developmentally appropriate choices about every other tool and material in the classroom. Why would we say this one was different? We trust you to be really mindful about blocks, but we don't think you can make the decision about the iPad, so we'll make it for you. That's not okay. And that's really the next one, that use DAP to make choices about everything in the classroom. Appropriate use depends on age, developmental level, needs, interests, linguistic background, abilities of each child. So again, this notion of fitting the technology, fitting the tool, fitting the experience, fitting the material to the individual child. Effective use, I think this one's important. Effective use of technology and media are active, hands-on, engaging, and empowering. They give the child control. They provide adaptive scaffolds to ease the accomplishment of tasks and are used as one of the many options to support children's learning. Wow, that's pretty good. It's pretty good because these were exactly the things that we were told technology couldn't do and was going to replace. If you put iPads in classrooms, kids are no longer going to go outside. They're not going to have free play. They're certainly not going to do creative art in the way that we describe, really messing with art materials, because they're just going to mess with that. Well, yeah, they'll mess with that, and they'll also mess with art materials. Right? So it's both. I think that's really important. But we're also, this is not just a statement, this is an expectation of teachers, that how you think about technology needs to be embedded in how we think about what's appropriate for young children, and that's about hands-on and engaging activities. When used appropriately, technology and media can enhance children's cognitive and social abilities. It's a pretty bold statement. Of all the research evidence that we reviewed, this was the one we felt was best supported. There's certainly research that suggests the opposite, because we still have that question. But we're pretty comfortable with this. Again, when it's used appropriately, it can be a positive tool. Interactions with technology and media should be playful, support creativity, exploration, pretend play, active play, and outdoor activities. Another big deal. The public health community was very concerned about technology because of the obesity in young children issue. That's a really important issue, very important. Is no technology the solution to obesity for children? We didn't think so, but we think you have to be really careful about that. The outdoor play group, the folks that really are about, get outside with kids, we're worried that kids are just going to sit inside with technology. That doesn't have to be the case. Rogers Center has an app out called Out About that, in fact, does just the opposite. You take your iPhone outside, and the whole activity is about being outside. So I think that's where creative teachers are going to have to say, actually, this is mobile technology. What can we do with it? And then technology tools can help educators make and strengthen homeschool connections. This is huge. We always struggle with this. Michael talked about parent engagement. Lisa asked a question about parent engagement yesterday in that session. We have some new tools for communication. We have new tools for connections. We have new tools for parents accessing information about their child's day and what's going on and seeing images and all of that. So we need to really be thinking about how we leverage these tools. Because I told you that teachers have these in their pockets, but lots of parents do too. And so we have this pathway that we didn't have before. We need to integrate technology throughout, not just the environment, the curriculum, the routines. Assistive technology to provide equitable access for children with special needs. That's a very short sentence that describes a much more important issue. And the next one as well. The technology tools can be effective for dual language learners, and we've got more information about that. And Karen Nemeth, some of you met in the last few days, helped us a lot with that piece. Digital literacy is essential to guide early childhood educators and parents in the selection, use, integration, and evaluation of technology and interactive media. Digital literacy for parents and for teachers, not just digital literacy for kids. This isn't something we're doing to kids. This is something we're all doing, and we're understanding more. A lot of controversy about the next one, about what we meant by digital citizenship, and do young children need a footprint on the internet as soon as they're born, and babies that haven't been born yet that have Facebook pages, and all of this stuff that we know about and we worry about. What we were saying was that part of digital literacy for young children is the ability to make choices, to know when you're safe, to know what's appropriate for yourself, to navigate this world in powerful ways. That doesn't mean that we've got toddlers out there roaming the internet. It means that we're preparing children to use these tools in powerful ways in their lives. And then again, early childhood educators training, professional development, examples of successful practice, which I talked about and which is part of the Tech Center project at Erikson, is to gather some of those examples. Develop technology and media knowledge, skills, and experience. We're not going to meet the expectations of the statement without supporting teachers. Research is needed on how young children use and learn with technology and interactive media, and to better understand both the short-term and long-term effects. So not only are we acknowledging that the research is a little unclear, we're begging all of you who do research to help us begin to really understand what this phenomenon is all about in ways that can really inform practice as well. And then just quickly through the recommendations. So select, use, integrate, and evaluate technology and interactive media in intentional and appropriate ways, and focus on the appropriateness and the quality of the engagement. Quality of the engagement, right? So yes, we acknowledge this is a pretty remarkable piece of technology. So that's kind of a given, right? And yes, multi-touch offers all these new opportunities, but it's the quality of the engagement that we have to be paying attention to. What NAEYC and the Rogers Center didn't take on, you're probably thinking, they missed something, was the content piece, right? I mean, here's where teachers' decision-making becomes critical. What's the difference between an appropriate, effective, and good app for a young child and one that is, in fact, not that? So helping teachers to make those choices. Balance of activities and programs for young children that, in fact, include technology but don't have technology replacing anything. It's technology in addition to, not technology instead of. And that's a critical definition. Understand the limits of technology, give careful consideration to technology with infants and toddlers, and be aware of the public health concerns. So again, we're saying don't ignore Michelle Obama and the Let's Move process where they're really raising concerns about kids in front of screens. That's important public policy. It's important work to pay attention to. We do have a professional responsibility in our context, in our setting, Just filter those things and decide what's appropriate. Again, for the youngest of children, we're saying no passive media for children under 2, as in no propping babies in high chairs and turning the TV on and walking away. It's not all right. It's not okay. But what about the family child care provider as a mixed age group of kids and needs to make lunch and has always made lunch by turning on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or Sesame Street and having the kids just watch for a little while she's in the kitchen? There's a nuance there somewhere, isn't there? Just because, I think, let me also say something, this is critical coming from the Rogers Center. We're not saying all television is bad. We're saying passive use of television is not appropriate. Television that leads to a conversation, that leads to an activity. Fred Rogers said the best thing about television is when you turn it off, right? Because it's what happens after that's more important. So, you know, these are where the nuances are going to take some definition and some examples from the field. And then provide leadership to ensure equitable access to technology and media experiences for the children in your care and for their parents and families. So coming back around to that. So 3 years, lots of words written, lots of words deleted, lots of words added, lots of people shouting at us, lots of us smiling and saying it's okay to shout at us. We want to hear what you have to say, because we did, in fact. I think this is my perspective. I helped write this. I think if folks who were really worried about what we were going to say and that we were going to say all tech all the time, take the time to read the statement, they're going to see a very balanced, reasonable approach to this, and may see a little of themselves in that, and may see some public health concerns echoed in that, and may see some concerns about outdoor play and active play embedded in that. We did pay a lot of attention. And I don't want to give the impression that it was only people who were against technology who spoke up, but the people who were against technology were particularly well organized and strong advocates and came first to all the sessions and sat in the front, and they made their presence known because they had a real agenda, and they wanted to be sure that we heard that. So statements on the street now, the interesting thing for all of us, for the field is, well, so what? Right? I mean, it's nice, looks kind of nice, it lives on the internet, you can print a copy, but so what? It only gets interesting when we start to think about what do we do with it? How do we turn this into practice? How do we turn this into a document that helps guide teachers to make decisions about technology in a rapidly changing environment? That's what I think is the power of the position statement. So I want to give the time we have left to questions and conversation, because I'm sure you have plenty, and comments. And just know that, unfortunately, unlike all the other comment sessions, we won't be scurrying back to change anything after your comment, but we do want to hear it. And I think what's important is that the field now needs to take this and make some sense out of it. And I think I'm most excited about looking for those examples of when people have done just that. And they're already out there. We're not just igniting an interest in technology in early childhood, but we're trying to define how it works. So questions or comments about this whole process or anything we had to say? Yeah.
Hi, Chip. I'm Dale McManus from Hatch. Thank you for that presentation. I learned a lot. I've been looking at the position statement since you all started, so it was exciting to see it come out. I wanted to ask you, a lot of what I do is go into classrooms with teachers and to do research, and I talk to them about technology and how we're going to do that and what that's going to look like day to day. Yep. And the very first thing they tell me is, oh, well, we have to look at how long children can be with screens. And so, I understand that, but the thing is, it's all over the map. Right. And I know in the position statement, you even give some, guidelines. You sort of recognize that there are some difference criteria. So anyway, I guess when you talked about research, let's go out and do more research and everybody participate. I just want to, talk to everyone here and ask you, how do we make sense out of it when in some centers or schools I might get 30 minutes a day or a week even, and then in some others, like I live and work in Texas now, it's 2 hours a day for for the their standards.
Right.
And so we have a very different environment.
Yeah, a couple of responses there. Nowhere in the statement do we say 30 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. We dodged that whole thing. But we didn't dodge screen time. And one of the things we're trying to help teachers understand is screen time is an ecological question. It isn't just how much time the child spends at the center looking at a screen. What are they doing at home? What are they doing on the weekend? How much screen time is in their lives? And we should be factoring that in. We should be talking to parents about screen time issues. I think the reason we didn't say 30 minutes is because that just then, there goes the judgment, there goes developmentally appropriate practice. The time should be related to what the child's doing with the technology. If I have a small group of kids that have been on the playground and they hear a bird sing, but they don't know what the bird is, and they come back inside and they start to use the iPad to do a great exploration about birds that live in our area and what bird sounds are, am I going to just take the iPad away at 30 minutes and say, well, I'm sorry, but your screen time today, and all week, actually, by the way, is over. So I think I think what you're raising is really important because teachers are asking us how many minutes. They want a guideline. Then they'll push back against it. I mean, at one level they want one, and another level the last thing they want is one. But some notion of tell us what's okay. And I think it's about balance. And it's about what's happening in the level of engagement. And if I've got kids really engaged and it's a lot of rich language and lots of exploration going on, I'm not watching the clock to decide whether the screen time's been okay. Right. Yeah. Well, but don't you think that's part of the opportunity of all of this? Right. Yep. Yeah, right.
Integration, and we're talking, you gave the beautiful example, this technology travels with me, and that I just want to raise that I think that's an issue for certain teachers in certain places, that it's going to be harder for them to keep track of that, and they're going to want that tendency to say, okay, you go sit in computer lab for 15 minutes today and we're all good. Right. And can I just share one other thing that I read last night? I didn't look into it, but apparently mothers-to-be can put a band around, and when the baby kicks, it sends a tweet.
Haven't heard that one. So I think the screen time issue is critical. I think I'm interested in us finding examples of where teachers are doing great stuff and appropriate stuff with technology. I'm looking for examples of where program policy supports great stuff happening with technology as well. So, and we got to start with state requirements that really place limits, or other kinds of organizations that place limits on it that are arbitrary. The Ecker scale talks about time limit. We have these things that we hold as very valuable that also have pretty specific kind of limits that may or may not need to be adjusted in this. What we didn't want to do with this, and this goes back to the not saying no to all technology for the very young children, was to have a policy that teachers were going to violate as soon as it was written anyway. They were just going to do what they knew to be right. And let me give you an example about the youngest children. This is the one we used all the time when we presented. If you say no technology for children under 2, if that's your position, and it's reasonable if that's what you believe, what you're also saying is no digital cameras in the classroom, no tape recorders and music in the CDs in the classroom. You're talking about no Skype with grandma. I mean, you start to kind of unwind all of this. So we're not saying all technology is great for young children. The other thing we said about the youngest children was it has to be in the context of the relationship, right? So reading a book on my lap in the rocking chair and then looking at an interactive ebook in my lap on the rocking chair fit within the context of this adult caregiver-child interaction, then it supports that. That's not the same thing as, let's get toddlers off in the corner each doing their own thing. So there's going to be a lot of interpretation of this. What else? No questions? I'm shocked. Lisa.
Thank you, Chip. Every time I hear you talk about the statement, I learn something more, so I really appreciate it. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the professional development piece and what you're going to be doing at Erikson.
Yep.
And and I wondered your response to an idea that I've been kind of noodling on, which is pulling together video examples of, on YouTube you can find a lot of examples of both good and bad practice with technology. And I don't think that there are, I mean, both from the parent perspective, which is what I often come from, as well as the teacher perspective, there's not as much conversation around what those bad examples are and what they look like. And I don't mean to be like horribly judgmental about it, but I'm thinking about, videos where, YouTube videos where a parent will just tell a child, here, take it, go look at this, this ebook, and the child asks a question of the parent, and the parent says, just watch. They don't actually want to engage with the child around that technology.
Yeah, I think that's what we hope the Tech Center will do the best. And what we're starting with is aggregating rich media examples. Those aren't always easy to find, and there are complications around examples of kids in classrooms that we have to confront. What we heard the most, Lisa, and you were in plenty of these sessions, was show me what it looks like. The words are, I get it, I see what you're saying, I certainly know developmentally, what does it look like? So, I mean, my gut reaction was, we got to find evidence that we can show teachers about what it looks like, and then start to have a community around those clips. So that is part of what we're up to. That and the other piece that we're trying to take on in the Tech Center at Erikson is that teacher, educator, professional development provider literacy piece as well, which is a harder, trickier conversation in some ways, but really critical, I think, to the success of all of this. Not that we're not talking about professional development for teachers as well. The other part of this that's important, in my work with online learning at Erikson, we take early childhood practitioners with very limited technology experience, and in 2.5 years of earning a very rigorous master's degree from Erikson Institute, they gain unbelievable technology experiences for collaboration, for communication, that will serve them well throughout their career. That's very intentional. That's not an accidental byproduct. We believe those are really important professional skills. So the other thing we'll be modeling is bringing people into an online community where we're modeling the use of the technologies that we're talking about in ways that hopefully will be helpful. So that's where we're starting, but it's an emergent process.
Hi, Chip. I'm Kate Highfield from Sydney, Australia. I'm fascinated by this statement and really excited to see it. It's great, thank you. Yeah. But one of the things that really surprises me from an Australian perspective is that there's a huge, and you've emphasised screen time very strongly. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of the media we're talking about is screen-based media.
Right.
There are heaps of other amazing technological tools that are out there that don't seem to get a look in. Could you comment on that? In particular, I'm thinking techno-toys, robotics, etc.
Yeah, in the position statement early on, we defined technology in a really broad way. And then you're right, we spent a lot of time talking about what people were most looking for guidance on, which was screens. But let's go back. There are no technology-free early childhood classrooms that I can think of, because we have record players and videos and all the rest. So it's there already, we're already using it. I think that goes back to my earlier comment about helping teachers, demystifying this by helping them understand they're already using these things. This is not some unknown world. So I think that is part of it. We tried really hard to use the very overarching definition for technology, but we also fell into quickly what people were asking us about the most. But we wanted to keep, part of the reason for having a broad definition and not just saying that what technology means to us is iPads and iPhones, is that we think that's the entree point for teachers, that in fact they're already using technology, and they already have some literacy around technology. They already have made some decisions about how long a child listens to music in the headphones, or how long they do other things. I think digital cameras is another one. Now, you could argue that there's a screen on a digital camera, and people did. We didn't kind of see it that way. And actually what we were worried about was if you say no technology and I can't take a picture of the child and turn it around immediately and show them, then I've lost this other opportunity. I can't, do any of that. So I think, again, when we start to gather examples, they can't just be examples of who's using the iPad. Because the other thing about the iPad is we're not all going to have these. We just simply aren't. And if we have technology in the classroom that's computer-based, it may be an old computer. My career in this field started in the early 80s with Apple II computers in the Weissman Center at UW-Madison. And this Orwellian fear of kids staring at screens all day long, and that's the end of interaction, it's the end of socialization. So I think we have to be mindful of that. But if what we set up for teachers is this is it, and all that other stuff actually is no longer significant, then we've really missed the point. And I think that's too bad. I think of the project in Florida and all you're doing, and sometimes you got to go low tech. Sometimes you actually have to mail something to somebody. Not email, actually mail something to someone or make a phone call. I mean, but I think we get so enamored with what's the newest, latest thing that we kind of forget that there's all these other things along the way that are part of the conversation. Yeah, thanks. Who else? Someone else? You've had one, you just haven't gotten the microphone. Up here.
Thank you. Lisa totally said what I was going to say about the videos, but it was interesting your response about media-rich experiences to put on the video. I would even challenge you to put all different types of experiences on the video and then talk about what the next step would be. And I think that's one of the great things you're personally able to do right off the top of your head. Right. Just give those examples of, oh, I see you're doing this right now. Let's take that to the next level. Right. What would the next step be? I recently did a professional development with some teachers about science in the classroom. Yep. And I think for some of these teachers, they actually just forgot what science was. Sure. I mean, they weren't thinking about just a decision-making process and making a choice and then seeing what happens and recording it as science. Yep. So just like you were saying, using a CD player in the classroom as technology. And we actually have a lot of teachers who only put the CD player on during nap time and don't even use it in any other educational way more than that, maybe. Right. So we can really sometimes need to start right from the beginning about what are the next steps, starting from where they are. And also maybe another thing you might be able to do is give the parents some language to explain to parents, give the teachers some language to explain to parents about what they're doing. Yeah. And maybe even giving them some really easy one-liners. Yeah. We call them, at Kinder Music, we used to call them foundations of learning statements. Yep. Like, well, how is this technology teaching your child, and what are we doing, and how are we doing it? Kind of getting that purpose out across that line. Yeah, good. No, that's exactly right. As we gather evidence, it needs to be all kinds of evidence of all kinds of technology. And I think it's in the what I'm most interested in as a passionate online instructor who has seen the power of community online and discussion online is, can we start a conversation where a teacher contributes a clip? Let me show you what I'm doing in class, and let me tell you about what I was thinking, and then other people can say, well, have you thought about this? Wow. Because again, it gets back to, we got to respect the teachers. We already have people doing amazing things. Let's start with them. So we're looking for the early adopters, right? We're looking for the tech leaders, the folks that are already doing it. We don't have to get to everybody right away. We don't have to change everyone. We don't have to change whole programs or directors. We're not going to successfully. But there's something about finding that person who's really enthusiastic. So if we're successful at creating a place, I mean, I think this is the other big shift is it's all about learning now. The conversation has shifted from teaching to learning. And online higher education, the conversation has to shift to learning or it doesn't work, right? Which means the role of the teacher has to change. And it's a very different process. So if we can really be putting our emphasis on how are these experiences helping learn, and then how are we as learners supporting each other? User-contributed content is one of the hottest games on the internet, right? But how many times in an environment like mine are we not actually interested in what the user has to say because I'm the expert, right? I'm the sage on the stage. Well, I need to become the guide on the side and support that. And actually, recently I heard someone say, how about sage on the side? Have you ever heard the sage on the stage, guide on the side idea? Because in fact, guide on the side can imply that you've given up all of your knowledge and you're just, another player. And in fact, that's not
true. So I think we can have some fun with this and trying to get people engaged and starting those, finding those examples. NAEYC is interested in this. The Rogers Center is interested in this. There's going to be a lot of players. I'm just one small cog in a larger wheel. But I think the other thing that's come out of this is this desire to collaborate and share resources and not all create a video library and not everybody do the same. You know, what can each of us do in a way that supports this best? So that's where we're at. Thanks.